Good morning and welcome. Okay, so today we're going to be doing two things. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to do some of the conveyances. We're going to work through them and make sure that we understand how to interpret the conveyance themselves, and then also some additional wrinkles in the rules of law that govern what conveyances are valid. And then, as I mentioned in the lecture yesterday, I'm going to point you guys to the course evaluation that I'd like you to do on e-learning for those of you who aren't quite sure, who don't know where it is. So with that, let's get right to it. Here is the first conveyance that I want to talk about. I'm going to put it into the chat. To A for life, then to A's heirs. So the first step in determining what interests are created by a conveyance is actually just to read the conveyance and figure out what it says that it creates. So we take it in chronological order. So who owns the present interest and what interest do they own? Right, that's correct. A owns a life estate. That's correct. Right now, we're just saying what the conveyance says it creates, and then we're going to talk about complications in the law. Okay. So, present interest is A owns a life estate. Okay. So, when a life estate is created, what future interest is associated with that? And who owns it? Again, according to the text of the conveyance. Go ahead, Perry.
I was saying that the type of conveyance it creates is that it only is valid for the lifetime of that person.
I agree that the life estate is only valid for the lifetime of A, but what future interest is created and who holds it, right? When we're describing,
I think it lapses at the death of that person.
I'm asking what the conveyance says. I'm not asking you to put any logic into it. I'm just asking you to read the text of the conveyance. Okay. Tiffany says that it's a reversion or a remainder, right? So these are the types of future interests that are created by life estates. Okay. And Perry, I want to be clear, right, that being critical about this and sort of trying to jump ahead, there's nothing wrong with that. But at this point in the process, we want to go through all the steps. We want to touch every step in the process so that we know that we understand what's going on. So I don't want you to think that I'm upset or that you did anything wrong, because you didn't. We're doing something specific here. So Tiffany's right that the future interests that are created are either a reversion or a remainder. Okay. Who does the conveyance say holds the future interest? A's heirs, right. That's exactly right. Okay. So is it a reversion or is it a remainder? Think about what the difference between those two is. Right, it's a remainder. Why? Well, no, you're right that remainders are attached to life estates, right? But so are reversions. Right, Adelia has it right. Crystal has it right. Yes, that the difference between the reversion and the remainder is that reversions go back to the original grantor and remainders go to a third party. Okay, so that's correct. Okay, so here is how you would describe the interests that the conveyance says it creates. Okay. Life estate to A, remainder to A's heirs in fee simple absolute. So when describing a future interest, let me put this format in the chat for you. When describing a future interest, you identify the future interest, you name the holder, and you describe the present interest that is created when the future interest vests. Okay, so future interest to holder in present interest. Now, let me give you guys the complication. There is a rule that grows out of the common law that comes from a case called Shelley's case. Okay, Shelley's case, I'm putting that in the chat for you. In Shelley's case, the rule is that if you have a single conveyance that creates a freehold present interest and a future interest in the present holder's heirs. Okay, that's a mouthful, so let me put that in the chat for you. So 3 requirements: single conveyance, present freehold interest, which means not a lease, and future interest in present holder's heirs. Okay. The rule in Shelley's case says that the present interest and the future interest merge and create a fee simple subject to whatever conditions may defeat the future interest. Okay? So in this case, let me put the conveyance back in the chat. Then to A's heirs, I have done that in every tutorial and caught it every time until now. Yes, to A's heirs. If Shelley's case applies in your jurisdiction, then A takes in fee simple absolute. Okay. If Shelley's case does not apply, then you have a life estate to A, remainder to A's heirs. Make sense? Clear? We good? No, Nicole says no. Okay. What's still confusing, Nicole?
So, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
So, I actually read this, and the distinction in the reading that I did was between the layman's interpretation of this and what the court actually decides. And I'm afraid I had the layman's view of this. What I'm not understanding is why it's not broken down in the way that we've been breaking it down with the remainder. Why is there the merge with
Right.
the between the heirs, between the future and the present interest?
Sure. Okay. So what do you think? What did your reading tell you?
It's, I think, in what I could remember, it gave your explanation where they're not two separate interests. I think it was something along the lines of, what was the breakdown? I can't remember the exact explanation, but it was something along the lines that they're not two separate interests, that, as you said, they merge into one. But I couldn't understand the reasoning behind the merger. I couldn't get the logic of the
Sure.
court.
Yeah, and part of the problem is that Shelley's case is fairly elderly. I don't think it's as old as the Duke of Norfolk's case that created the rule against perpetuities, but it's still fairly old. And judicial writing reflects its times. And so, if you've struggled with reading, say, Dickens or Sir Walter Scott, right? Or, sort of any classic English literature that's more than about 100 years old, not really surprised that reading judgments from the same time period is difficult, right? I find it difficult. So here is my best explanation, okay? You remember how we've said on a number of occasions that heirs don't exist until someone dies?
Yes.
So that's basically the reason for the rule in Shelley's case. And let me unpack that for you a little bit. If the heirs don't exist, then the future interest still exists. It has, because A only has a life estate. It has to be held by someone.
Mm-hmm.
Can't be held by the original grantor, because then the original grantor could dispose of it and to someone else and dispossess A's heirs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can't be held by any additional person who isn't named in the conveyance, because if they're not named in the conveyance, then unless they're the original grantor, it violates the statute of frauds. Which means that the only person who can hold the future interest and not dispossess A's heirs is A. So that is why the interests merge, is because the present interest and the future interest are, to the mind of the court in Shelley's case and in jurisdictions that follow that rule, the same person. Now, does it make more sense?
Yes, but then, so when A dies, then does it, what happens when A dies? Let me put it that way.
Sure. The life estate extinguishes. The remainder vests in A, but because they're dead, it vests in their heirs as created by their will or by operation of law. And then the effect of the conveyance is carried out. The one thing that happens, right, is when Shelley's case applies, A does have the power to dispossess their heirs, right? Because they hold in fee simple absolute, and so they can sell that future interest. Where Shelley's case does not apply, they can't.
So where Shelley's case applies, it's as though to A's heirs doesn't exist. Like, that is not a part of the conveyance language, even though it's there. I mean, the interpretation.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to describe it, that if you meet the conditions of Shelley's case and your jurisdiction applies Shelley's case, it's like that piece of the conveyance doesn't exist. I think that's a fair description.
Yeah. So it only exists, basically, in fact, when A dies and it becomes a present, well, not present.
No, it only exists where Shelley's case does not apply.
No, when I asked what happens when A dies, you said then it vests in A's heirs.
Yes, but that would be the same as, if you if you only conveyed to A, right, and create a fee simple absolute, then that, then when A dies, his heirs take in fee simple absolute, right? Same thing. So A's, the language about A's heirs only matters if Shelley's case doesn't apply.
Right. So this is why I was wondering, then why mention it in the case why is the language the same where Shelley's case
Do you
applies?
remember last Thursday how I said that stupid people convey property all the time? And by the way, I do see your hand, Adelia. I'm not ignoring you. I'm trying to finish this this conversation, and then we'll move on to your question. So I think so. The answer to your question, right? Why include this? Why discuss this? Is that people do not always convey property in a using clear and obvious best practices language, right? And we need to be able to discern what interests are created when people use bad conveyances in an attempt to what they think is clearly communicate their intent. Does that make sense now?
It is clear now. Yes, thank you.
Right. Okay. Adelia, now, and by all means, if I have mispronounced your name, tell me, but go ahead.
Okay, good morning. You pronounced it correctly. So the general principle then is that A's heirs wouldn't get their interest as a life estate.
Well, okay, so life estates never go to heirs, right? Because upon death, they terminate. But what I think you might be asking is, do A's heirs get dispossessed under Shelley's case? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Okay. The answer is maybe, right? Because the rule in Shelley's case gives A the property in fee simple absolute, which means that they can sell it, right? A can sell it.
A got it as a life estate.
That's what the conveyance says, right? But Shelley's case provides that because of the existence of the life estate of the present interest and the future interest in the heirs, that they merge and they become fee simple absolute. Does that make sense now?
Sort of. So is it a case where so jumping a little ahead, if A's heirs get the property, right, after they have gotten their present interest. So all right, so A has died now and A's heirs are alive and they get the interest. What are they able to pass that interest on, or after their death does it revert to the original grandson?
Okay. So if you recall, right, what the conveyance says is that A's heirs take in fee simple, right? Their remainder is in fee simple absolute. If there were conditions attached to their remainder, so for example, if it was 2A for life, then to A's heirs so long as they reside on the property, right? And Tiffany, I see your comment, and we're going to talk about fee tail in just a second. Okay, but same with Adelia. I want to finish this conversation and then move on to yours. Okay. So if we conveyed it as 2A for life, then to A's heirs so long as they reside on the property, okay, Shelley's case would operate to merge the present interest and the future interest, but it would not eliminate the condition. And so A would at that point take in a fee simple subject to condition subsequent. So this is by way of build up to the question that you're actually asking, which is, in the conveyance as I presented it to you originally, to A for life, then to A's heirs, there's no condition attached. So that future interest is taken in fee simple absolute. Does that make sense?
Okay, it does. It does.
And so when A's heirs receive the property, whether they receive it upon A's death due to the operation of the conveyance, because it's not a Shelley's case jurisdiction, or they receive it through inheritance because A held in fee simple absolute and then he died. However they receive fee simple absolute under this conveyance.
Okay,
Makes
so when Shelley's case doesn't apply, they would have to get it as inheritance. That's what you're saying?
So, okay. You've got it backwards, right? Where Shelley's case does not apply, their future interest exists in the conveyance. And so they do not, it passes outside probate, arguably, right? The only role for the probate court is to identify the heirs at law. Okay.
So that's where Shelley's case applies.
That's where Shelley's case does not apply, because the future interest exists outside of A's estate. Does that make sense?
Sir, I'm so confused. Like, the sentence is so long when you're explaining that. By the time I get to the end, I forgot if you said if Shelley's case applies or it doesn't. So could you do it in like
Right.
a shorter way?
Sure.
Like, yeah.
Sure. So let's start with Shelley's case jurisdictions. Okay. Present interest and future interest merge.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. A now holds in fee simple absolute.
Okay. Okay.
When A dies, their fee simple interest is part of their estate, and it goes to their heirs as part of the estate process. Okay, whether that be an inheritance or a trust, or however the A has arranged for their estate to pass. This is not an estates administration class. Okay, so that's the Shelley's case jurisdiction.
So the principle is that he would have to die anyways, but he wouldn't pivot on the for life aspect in a Shelley's case jurisdiction.
Say that again, I'm sorry. You broke up in the middle.
So either way, the interest would be passed upon his death, but in a Shelley's case jurisdiction, it wouldn't pivot on the for life conveyance. That's what you're saying?
That's backwards. In the Shelley's case jurisdiction, the for life goes away.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Okay, yeah. Yes. No, that's correct. So
okay.
The other piece of this, right, and this is getting into estates administration, which is not the topic of this class, but just to sort of make this point as to why this difference matters. If A holds in fee simple absolute and the land is part of the estate, it's available for the estate to use to pay creditors. If A holds a life estate and their heirs hold the remainder, and so it's a non-Shelley's case jurisdiction, the land is not available for creditors in the estate because it just passes automatically through the conveyance, right? So do you see why this distinction matters now?
Yes.
Yeah.
So like, okay, in the tutorial questions that we got, should we assume that it is a Shelley's case jurisdiction, or does it not matter?
So to be perfectly frank, they were written, the questions were not written in a way to require you to think about any of the things that we're going to discuss today. But that doesn't mean that I didn't make a mistake. So the answer is, if you think that Shelley's case could change the result, I would encourage you to say, hey, in a Shelley's case jurisdiction, I would say that this is the result. In a non-Shelley's case jurisdiction, I would say this.
Okay.
But I will say I didn't intend for you to have to apply that. Okay.
Okay. All right.
So, all right. So Tiffany, sorry, see, I wasn't ignoring you. Didn't forget you. Tiffany, let's talk about the fee tail. The fee tail, I would describe the fee tail as disfavored. And so, and by that I mean that I would say that judges want to see some pretty, where it's not been abolished, that judges want to see very clear intent that the estate is intended to be entailed. And so I would say that a fee tail can only be created using language sort of like this: to A and the heirs of their body. Okay, so you gotta make it clear in the conveyance that you're limiting this to lineal descended heirs. And that is that's the language that would create a fee tail. If you don't see language like that, you can expect that it's not a fee tail. The answer to that is, I'm not sure. I don't think so. But if you email me, this is to Rakisha. If you email me, I can clear your attempt and let you re-upload. So yeah, go ahead, Adelia.
Okay, sir, just to clarify, so I understand what happens in a Shelley's jurisdiction, right?
Mhm.
So if it's not a Shelley's jurisdiction, do A's heirs get it as a life estate interest? Basically,
No, because
no?
because remember, the conveyance gives it to them in fee simple absolute.
So either
So-
way, they get it in fee simple absolute.
Right. They get whatever present interest the conveyance creates for them. It's just, does the present interest holder also get their same interest? Does that make sense?
Yes. So the important part is just to look at what A gets, because consistently, whether in a Shelley's jurisdiction or out of Shelley's jurisdiction, A's heirs will always get a fee simple absolute.
Well, A's heirs will always get the same present interest that they would have gotten. So let me show you a different example that will do something that will do what I mean. So okay, to A until they reside outside of St. George, then to A's heirs so long as they reside in St. George. Okay, so A has a fee simple defeasible. A's heirs have a fee simple subject to condition subsequent. But in a Shelley's case jurisdiction, these interests merge, and A now takes subject to a fee simple condition subsequent. Okay, and if A spends their whole life in St. George and dies residing in St. George, then A's heirs take subject to the same condition. Does it make sense now? So A's heirs get what they're always going, what the conveyance says they're supposed to get. The question is, do they get it by inheriting that from A, or do they get it from the conveyance?
Okay.
Does it make sense now?
Somewhat, yes.
Okay, great. So go ahead, Nicole.
Okay, so I'm more confused now. I think it's easier for me if we can just possibly go back to the simpler example.
Well, no, I mean, I understand I understand that. The real world does not always provide us with simple, clean examples, so that it's important to make sure that we understand how the rule applies in the more complicated one. But let's go back and sort of work through this together.
Okay, so I think from what you were saying, where the rule in Shelley's case applies, there is no A and heirs. It merges into, you said, a fee simple absolute.
Yep.
Where the rule of Shelley's case does not apply, upon the death of A, the future interest is a remainder.
Yes.
And so what A's heirs inherit is a fee simple.
Well, they don't
No.
inherit, right?
Because they can't inherit from a life estate, right? Is that the logic?
Right. They don't inherit, they receive it through the operation of the conveyance.
That is what I'm not understanding. What does that mean?
It means that I mean, basically it means, so this is getting a little far afield from the topic of the class, but it's fine. It's fine. It means that instead of having to go through the probate process and, you know, satisfy creditors and possibly have the land sold to pay debts, and then whatever's left gets divided among A's heirs, the only job for the probate court is to identify the heirs, and then they just step into the ownership of the land.
So basically A gets everything that A's heirs get everything that A owns.
Yes, and there's no opportunity for anybody to push back against that and say that the land is an asset that can be used by the estate.
So just to be clear, the life estate is not inheritable. So upon A's death, what A's heirs inherit is the fee simple absolute. Not inherit, what they get, what they take from the
conveyance
is
the fee simple. They take what the conveyance gives them, which is fee simple absolute.
Okay, great. Understood. Thank you.
Great. Okay. So do we feel clear about this? We ready to move on? Okay. This next one is a little more complicated. To A until they become a lawyer, then to B until they marry, then to C so long as they never marry a Montague. So again, we're starting with what does the conveyance say? And then we're going to talk about how some operation of law complicates it, okay? So, what does the conveyance say? Start with the present interest. Who holds it? What do they get? A gets it, that's correct. What do they have? Yes, fee simple determinable. Why is it fee simple determinable? Right. This is a specific event that is identifiable, right? So A gets a fee simple determinable. All right. So fee simple determinables have to have a future interest. So what future interest is created? Who holds it? And what present interest does it convey? So B's possessory interest, right, once that future interest vests, is a fee simple determinable, but what's the future interest that B holds? Do remainders go with fee simple determinable? Okay. Okay. So possibility of reverter is the name of the future interest. Tiffany says that A holds a fee simple condition subject to a condition subsequent. She says that it's stopping something from happening. So go ahead, Tiffany. Go ahead, Tiffany Durant.
Hi, sir. Good morning. I
Oh,
would say that it will be a condition upon subsequent because A becoming a lawyer is stopping her interest. So to me, a condition is when it stops something from happening, and a determinable is if you do it, then you will get the land. That's how I was saying it, but
well,
because I am going, and to me it seems as though it's a condition because I just say you said that a determinable is something to happen and a condition will stop something from happening. So it's here saying that as she becomes a lawyer, she no longer has the that would stop her. So
okay. No, I see the logic, right? I see the
That's-
logic and I understand what you're saying. So it seems to me that defeasible fees always impose conditions that stop your interest, right? The question is, what is the condition that divests you? Okay. And so if it is an ascertainable event, if it is a thing that comes into existence, then it's a fee simple determinable. But if the condition that ends your interest is something that's going on and it's happening over time, and then it ceases to happen and you lose your interest, that's a fee simple condition subsequent. Okay, so it's not who it happens to, whether it divests the present interest or empowers the future interest, because the same thing does both in all of these, right? Yeah, we were gonna come to that in a minute, because I'm not even sure what you were saying with that, Trisha. Okay, so this is how I'm conceptualizing of the issue, right? So let me show you how I would, right? So I would describe this as a fee simple determinable, because A, becoming a lawyer is an event that happens. If I wanted to write a fee simple condition subsequent that would be triggered by the same event, I would phrase it this way. To A, so long as they never become a lawyer. Okay, and Trisha, I this is a point that I made a couple of times earlier in the week in other tutorials. So I'm not. This is something that a lot of people get confused about. You will see cases, and Keandra, I'm not ignoring you. You will see cases where the judges sort of throw up their hands and give up on trying to figure out what is actually the condition and just rely on the language of the condition, right? And so you'll see cases where so long as, or but if, or unless are treated as condition subsequents. You'll see cases where, yeah, the key thing to keep in mind is that there's no magic words that make it a determinable or a condition subsequent. Okay. The words give you some evidence, but you have to characterize the event. Okay, and this is one of the things that I think Professor Owusu's book does a fairly good job with, is explaining that the distinction between these two doesn't seem very principled and doesn't seem tied to anything that we can really discern in the cases as a whole. And so you will see cases where it just turns on the language. You will see cases where we talk about the event. But what we think and what we really sort of want to encourage as the law is focusing on the event, because the event is the expression of the intent of the grantor. Okay, so does that make sense? Keandra, go ahead. I'm sorry to have waited.
Hi, good morning, sir. Okay, so I've just been a little bit lost because you said to describe the estate. So you went with A first and you was like, A is a fee simple determinable, and then you asked, was B. So then you said that B is a fee simple determinable also. But then you asked for the future interest. So describing the estate and the future interest is two separate questions, is what you're asking
Hang on.
for?
Let me put the conveyance back in the chat so that we can all look at it, and then we'll talk about this. So. Okay, so yes, to come back to what you were saying, A has a fee simple determinable, and remember we said at the beginning of the class that we describe future interests by saying the future interest to the holder in the possessory interest, right? And you have to identify the possessory interest because you have to know what the future interest holder receives when their future interest vests. Okay, so people said that B got a fee simple determinable, and yes, that is correct that B's possessory interest is a fee simple determinable, but that's not what they get, right? What they get is the future interest in fee simple determinable. And scrolling up, yeah, Tiffany here is correct that B's future interest is a possibility of reverter because the possibility of reverter is the future interest created by a fee simple determinable. Okay, so with that in mind, if B gets a fee simple determinable, C gets a possibility of reverter that is held. And yes, Tiffany, you are absolutely correct. C holds in condition subsequent because unlike A and B, C's condition is a thing that ceases to happen, right? On the day that C marries a Montague, they will have no longer never married a Montague, right? And then because C takes with a condition subsequent, there is a future interest. Okay, Nicole, go ahead. What's up?
I'm just wondering where the public policy issues, if they do apply, do they apply?
They do, and
Um,
the answer is that they apply after we figure out what the conveyance says. So let me since we're almost out of time, let me just take you through this and explain the public policy issues in question. Because Nicole's absolutely right that the purpose of this conveyance is to illustrate some public policy issues. Okay, so let me put the conveyance, the interests that the conveyance claims to create in the chat for you. Okay, so A gets a fee simple determinable, B gets a possibility of reverter in fee simple determinable, C gets a conditional possibility of reverter, and the original grantor gets a conditional right of reentry in fee simple absolute, and we have explained the entire conveyance. But here's the puzzle. We don't like restraints on marriage. Complete restraints on marriage. If you get married, you lose your property, are almost always void as a matter of public policy. When you have a void condition in a conveyance, anything that depends on that condition falls away. So as a matter of public policy, what we would describe this as doing is creating fee simple determinable to A because A's condition does not violate the restraint against marriage. Possibility of reverter to B in fee simple absolute. Okay, so when you guys are answering these kinds of questions, you are free to, if a public policy issue comes into play, to jump straight to the conveyance yeah, so to answer the questions, right, you are free to jump to sort of what public policy would require. So you are not required to tell me to jump through all the hoops that we've jumped through today. The point of this exercise is to help you understand how the process works. But when you're answering questions for me, you are free to go straight to the final answer, okay? So great job today, really good questions, really strong engagement. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to let you guys go, and I will see you tomorrow. Do not forget, let me show you guys, do not forget the midterm evaluation. And it is, hang on, I'm going to show it to you. Here we go. Okay. Go into the course website, go to the calendar block for this week, click on midterm course evaluation, and it's very short, it's anonymous, you don't have to, so you can just put me on blast, but I want to know the things that are working, the things that aren't working, so that I can do more of the things that are working and less of the things that aren't. Okay? So see you guys tomorrow and take care. Bye.